Welcome back to Legally Speaking. I'm Sonia Brown. On today's show, we're discussing the topic of personal injury cases. Our next guest is attorney Woody Sampson, a partner at the law firm of Thomas, Kennedy, Sampson, and Tompkins. Welcome to the show, Attorney Sampson.
Thank you, Sonia. Glad to be here.
I am very excited to have you here. And before we go into this topic a little more, why don't you tell our viewing audience a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
Well, I'm a native of Atlanta, Georgia. Went to Morehouse College and the University of Georgia Law School. About 18 years ago, I started practicing with my father, who started the firm of Thomas, Kennedy, Sampson, and what is now known as Tompkins. And we are the oldest African-American law firm in this state. We do litigation, a wide variety of litigation, from medical malpractice to personal injury to premises liability, and we do both sides. We do plaintiff's work, which is what it's called when we represent individuals. And we also represent Fortune 500 companies like the Coca-Cola Company, Nationwide, MARTA, and the Atlanta Housing Authority, just to name a few.
Well, I sound like we have the perfect guest. You can talk to us about it from both sides. And I want to get right into it because we hear about personal injury cases. I want to talk to you about medical malpractice specifically.
Certainly.
Now, we know a lot of times people, will have a misconception that if they or a loved one has suffered some sort of negligence at the hand of a medical provider, that they always have a claim. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I see that all the time. And certainly when somebody, a loved one has been involved in a medical situation, it's usually a catastrophic event. It's either a catastrophic injury or death. And there are a lot of emotions that are taking place at that particular time. And usually when I get a call, I will counsel them on the law. The first question that I usually get from anybody that gives me a call is, do I have a case? And at that point, I don't know. I don't know whether or not the person has a case. There have been many times that I thought that a person had a case only to later find out that they do not have a case. And the reason is because I'm not a doctor. I'm not a doctor and I don't know the medicine. And really, in order to determine whether or not you have a medical malpractice claim in Georgia, I have to get an expert to take a look at the medical records of the situation that the loved one may have been involved in, as well as the past medical records, the medical treatment that took place preceding the particular incident. And usually what I'll do is I'll tell the person that calls to gather up all the records, bring them to me, and then I will send them out to a medical provider. Say, for instance, if you treated in the emergency room, I will find an emergency room doctor to take a look at the record to determine whether or not there's been what's called a breach of the standard of care. And now, and you probably...
Can you tell our audience what the breach of a standard of care is? I mean, that's a lot of words, so what is that?
And it's sort of this nebulous, kind of vague term. But in essence, really, the standard of care is simply what would a reasonable physician do under like or similar circumstances when they're treating an individual. And doctors have, I guess, a certain minimum level of care that they're required to give in certain situations. And if they fall below that minimum level of care, then that's known as a breach of the standard of care. And no lawyer can tell you with a telephone call whether or not some doctor has breached the standard of care. Okay. So I counsel everyone that calls me. I tell them I don't know whether or not you have a case. I'll be happy to help investigate the case for you and to gather up all of your records. And then oftentimes, individuals will complain that they can't get records or they don't know what records to get. Okay. And I'll tell them that you are entitled to your records.
They're my records. So
they're your
as
records.
A patient, they're my records.
They're
so
your
they
records.
Can't be withheld.
They can't be withheld. Or if you if they're dealing with a family member who has died, the administrator of the estate is entitled to those records, and those records you should be able to get and you shouldn't get any pushback from any medical provider with respect to those records.
Well, let's say we've gotten the records, we've had the experts, we've determined that there is a viable case to move forward. What are the costs associated? How does someone, or how do you as a plaintiff's attorney determine what the costs are going to be for me
Right.
as the person bringing this lawsuit?
Right, and that's a very good question, because I get calls all the time from different individuals who think they may have a claim. And as I said before, I don't know whether or not the claim is going to be viable or, or not. I just have no way of knowing prior to getting an expert review. And so usually what I'll tell the clients that come to me is you will pay for the initial fee for obtaining the expert review. And usually that fee is somewhere, it can range from anywhere from $1,000 to $2,500. And that's one of the things about medical malpractice lawsuits, is they can be very expensive. But if an expert says and comes back and says, there was a breach of the standard of care in that particular case, then I will take your case on what's known as a contingent fee basis. And I think that we talked a little bit in the first segment about that, and most personal injury attorneys take cases on a contingent fee basis. A lot of medical malpractice attorneys will charge a little higher percentage because the costs associated with bringing a medical malpractice case can be astronomical. Expenses can range from anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 or more. I think the last—
You said expenses.
Expenses.
Right? Okay.
Expenses, meaning while I'm prosecuting the case, you don't have to pay any of that money. That $80,000 is what I would pay to prosecute the case,
so
to investigate.
You sort of advance us some money?
Well, it's not an advance. It's what happens during the course of the filing of the lawsuit, because several things have to happen. You have to hire an expert witness. That initial $2,500 just covers the initial expert review. That expert may become your testifying expert after that, at which point he will have probably more records to review as you investigate the case. He then has to come and testify during what's known as a deposition, in which the other side gets to ask him all sorts of questions about what his opinions are. And so it's not uncommon that you might have 2 or 3, 4 experts in a medical malpractice case, and they could range from $7,500 per expert to $15 or $20, depending on how far in the litigation you go and whether or not you end up at trial. So medical malpractice cases are very, very expensive, and medical malpractice attorneys are very particular about the cases that they take. Okay,
and I'll ask you real quick, about how long, is there an average of how long? I've heard cases can take up to years sometimes before they're settled or taken to trial.
Oftentimes, as with any litigation, I tell people that this is not going to be a quick resolution, and especially in the medical malpractice arena. I do both defense work as well as plaintiff's work in this arena. So I've represented Grady Hospital for quite some time, as well as representing other individuals that may have medical malpractice claims. And in all my years of doing this, I tell people, listen, you have to be in this for the long haul, because the defendants and the insurance companies that are representing defendants, if you're on the plaintiff side, more than likely they're gonna prosecute the case or defend the case, and it's gonna be a while. It's not gonna be a short or quick settlement. Yep.
Well, I want to switch gears real quick here. Another common thing we talk about with personal injury cases. What about that person that slips and falls in the grocery store, in the mall? What is it that they should do if that does happen? There's a puddle of water and they slip. What are some of the things that they should do if they're trying to get information together?
Yeah, that's known to, kind of as a premises liability situation. And in a premises liability situation, the landowner is responsible for known dangers, So one of the first things that you have to do in a slip and fall situation is, number one, you need to report the incident. If there are people nearby, witnesses that are nearby, you need to get their information so that someone can follow up with them as soon as possible. Okay. Slip and falls are probably one of the most difficult personal injury claims to prosecute, because one of the things that you'd have to prove, say in your typical situation where you have a puddle at the grocery store, number one is you have to prove that the defendant grocery store knew
okay,
or should have known about the puddle there.
Okay.
So you need some evidence to show that either their inspection procedures regarding the maintenance of the safety of the area were not maintained, or that there was some witness that saw some employee nearby in the area, or someone to testify that the puddle was there for a significant amount of time. So you can see that just being able to present that type of evidence is a daunting task. And it's very important. And I know when people fall in the grocery store, the first thing that their inclination is, am I okay?
Yeah.
Right. It's not, let me find witnesses.
Right.
But if you believe you're injured at all, the first thing that you need to do is try to make sure that it's documented at the store, and that there are individuals, if there are individuals there that witnessed the incident, that you get their information. Okay. Yeah.
Well, this has been wonderful. So much information, and I know our viewing audience, will take this information, hopefully use it, and be better educated about what to do if they ever find themselves in a situation that's either medical malpractice or a premises liability situation. So I definitely want to thank you for being a part of our show today,
Glad
Attorney
to be
Sampson,
here.
and real excited that you've been here with us and shared this information.
Thank you.
That is just a wrap up of what we've been discussing here about medical malpractice. But after the break, we'll come back and have a complete wrap up of today's show.